Hi everyone, my name is Claire Hobby. I'm from TCO Development. I lead our purchaser engagement group. And for those of you who are new to us today, TCO Certified is a sustainability certification for IT products. So I thought today we'd take an overview of sustainability in IT, where we are today, and also some thinking around using purchasing to drive environmental and social progress connected to the products that we buy and use every day. A couple of housekeeping notes about our webinar today. We're going to keep it pretty short. So the idea is that we take maybe 30 minutes, we explore some of the issues, a little bit about TCO Certified, what's new in our latest generation. So once again, today, we're going to really look at some of the basics. For those of you who might be newer to sustainability connected to IT, for some of those who may know about some of the social and environmental issues, but maybe want to know about what you can do about them. And also a little bit about our latest generation, Generation 8. Of criteria that we launched in December of last year. So some of the main things there, what's new, and some resources we hope you can make use of. So starting with, I wanted to talk about 5 main issues that in our experience are really the hot topics that we're really dealing with today as far as sustainability connected to the IT ecosystem, meaning supply chain, manufacturing, but also our use and what happens to products after we've finished using them. Just to give you an overview of these 5 issues, what's the problem we're dealing with? What are some of the facts and figures that we maybe need to understand to get a greater understanding of each issue? So we'll start with e-waste. This is not a new issue. It's one we're certainly very much aware of, but it's a continuing problem and it's actually growing. If we think about the growing demand for demand for IT products, particularly in the developing world, there's shorter life cycles and lower prices, which make the products much more accessible than they've ever been. But if we look at some of the facts around e-waste, the UN Global E-Waste Monitor in 2016 estimated annual e-waste at 45 million metric tons. That's per year. And it's not decreasing. That same number is estimated to increase to 53 metric tons by 2021. So this is a crisis that we need to deal with, both on the industry side, but definitely also from the user and the purchasing side. There's a lot that we can do. So of this pile of e-waste in the world, only about 20% today is recycled. So we still have a lot of product that's either just being stored, but also being exported and incinerated and dismantled manually, which obviously causes a lot of hazard towards the environment and human health, particularly in developing regions of the world where this work often takes place. And we also need to think about capturing some of the valuable materials that are included in our computers and other devices, materials such as gold that have a value and can definitely be reused. We also want to think about other content in the devices that we use, such as plastic. What's included in that plastic? We know plastics include chemicals, some of which are very hazardous, both to human health, but also the possibility of leaching into the environment, for example. So e-waste is something that is still a very current and a very growing problem. The second issue I thought we'd take a look at is conflict minerals. And I'm sure many of you have heard of what's called 3TG, which is known as tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold. Often talked about within the context of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. But mining of these minerals actually happens in many countries throughout the world, an estimated 80 countries of the world, this kind of mining takes place. These minerals are important to the functioning of a lot of the devices we use, in batteries, circuit boards, capacitors, for example. What we need to remember is that a lot of this mining is informal or artisanal. So it happens in very small operations by hand, and in a lot of ways, it's fueling the conflicts that are already existent in particularly in the DRC. So for industry, this informal system makes it really difficult for them to trace the origins of the minerals they need to make the products, from the mines through to the smelters, through to the manufacturing supply chain. In the meantime, local communities are suffering from human rights abuses at the hands of warlords and other local actors. And of course, there's inherent environmental damage associated with the practice as well. Like in the picture, we see that workers are largely unprotected. We can see this guy has rubber boots on, but we see a lot of cases where there are no such personal protective gear in place. Third issue, social responsibility, perhaps in a somewhat broader perspective. So thinking more about the factory level of the supply chain. And there we're looking at issues of working hours, student workers and protections in place for them. There are also still issues of forced labor out there in the world, particularly connected to work permits, migrant workers, for example, as well as some of the more familiar problems and challenges with worker health and safety protections. I will say there's a lot going on in this space right now, both from the industry side, also from the purchaser side. Purchasers really want to find a way where they can have a positive effect in protecting the workers that make the products they want to buy. So the challenge for purchasers, however, as we know, is how do you know the criteria you set have a direct effect in the supply chain? And we'll talk a little bit about that later. The fourth issue, hazardous substances. We talked a little bit about chemicals in plastics earlier. And chemicals are in so many things that we buy and use every day, from furniture, toys, IT products are, of course, no exception. If we think around some of the basic numbers on chemicals, there's an estimated 144 million chemicals in existence today. That's a huge number. And thousands of new chemicals enter the market every day. The problem is we know too little about the risks associated with those chemicals. There's just too many of them to do viable assessments on. Another aspect connected to hazardous substances is some recent numbers from a UN report covering human rights of workers. And it's estimated that one worker dies every 30 seconds because of exposure to hazardous substances at work, which is obviously very concerning. If we think about IT products specifically, they contain plastics and cables that contain flame retardants, plasticizers, and other chemicals as well. And chemicals are also used in the manufacturing processes at the same time. Finally, here's a topic that I'm sure many of you have been exposed to in the last couple of years when it's become maybe the hottest topic in sustainability thinking and practice throughout product life cycles and management practices as well. The circular economy, or rather moving from a linear approach to a circular approach. And if we think about IT products, the linear approach of taking, so mining, making and disposing, think e-waste, we can obviously start to understand that this is not such a sustainable model. It has significant environmental consequences of constantly starting from raw materials through to finished product and disposing of that finished product. So the thinking around the circular economy is to keep the products and the materials that we already have, keep them in circulation at the highest possible value for as long as possible. This is going to be a big focus, not just for us within TCO Certify, but throughout the ecosystem for electronics. So together, we really have the power to change this. And I really wanted to stop there and just focus our attention on the fact that this idea of working together is incredibly important. I think traditionally we've maybe had an understanding that we have buyers, purchasers, procurement people on one side of the equation and industry on the other side of the equation, and hopefully the demand and the ability to deliver on those criteria meet up. I think today that the challenges are very complex. We all are focused somewhat on reaching a similar goal of a sustainable life cycle. So I think this dialogue and working together towards these common goals is incredibly important. And that's what we within TCO Certified really try to promote. A really quick look for those of you who are new to TCO Certified. We are a global sustainability certification exclusively for IT products. Our criteria cover social and environmental responsibility in a fairly broad scope of criteria. We're used both by purchasers to specify certified products as part of their procurement process and contracting and tender work, as well as industry to track their sustainability progress connected to the products that they make. We're an independent certification that includes verification in accordance with ISO 14024, and you're more than welcome to go and look that up, also known as a Type 1 eco-label. Some quick facts. Our criteria cover 8 product categories, all IT products, many of which you probably use every day. Right now we have just over 3,000 certified product models covering 22 brands. That number changes daily. So if you want to go and see what is certified, feel free to go to our product finder at tcocertified.com and you can see which products are covered. And as I mentioned before, we launched our 8th generation of criteria in December. We issue a new generation of criteria every 3 years, and we believe that cadence is important to keep up with the rapid pace of technology development in the IT space. Really briefly, a look at our verification process, which I know a lot of you have asked about. We really look at verification throughout the life cycle. So in order to certify a product, industry works with our independent verifiers to look at the product performance, product compliance, and factory and brand level compliance, and verify that all of those meet the criteria. They can then apply for certification, and then we do a series of follow-up steps. And a lot of these are risk-based, depending on factory, product, etc. We do follow-up product testing. We go back and revisit the factory auditing process, look at how non-conformities in the factories are corrected and in fact closed, for example. And we also look at the brand level engagement in activities such as social responsibility and responsible mining, for example. A quick picture from our launch event in Brussels in December. Here are some of the brand representatives that were able to join us and receive some of the first certificates of the first certified products. So again, feel free to check them out on our product finder. Talking of Generation 8, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what's new in this latest generation, because this is our biggest shift yet towards our goal of a sustainable life cycle for IT products. And with Generation 8, we want to focus on 3 main themes. The first one is supply chain responsibility and transparency. The second is this more circular approach to IT products, so keeping those products in use. And the third one is this more macro goal that we are all responsible for working towards, and that's the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. And while we don't have specific criteria directed at the SDGs, our entire collection of criteria has been designed with that larger approach in mind, particularly SDG 12 of a sustainable consumption and production pattern. A quick look at what we mean specifically by some of these new criteria. We take a life cycle focus, as you know. That means we look at the phases of an IT product. So we divide our criteria in that way. So the first phase is manufacturing and material sourcing. And there we look at product and sustainability information, so some key performance indicators about the product itself that we think are helpful for purchasers to start to track the effect of using TCO certified. We also look at socially responsible manufacturing and environmentally responsible manufacturing. Moving through to the use and the reuse phase, and this reuse is really important when we're thinking about the circular economy. We look at user health and safety, product performance, and product lifetime extension, using our products longer and preparing them for reuse as well. Finally, we look at recovery and recycling. So reduction of hazardous substances comes in here, for example, because we want to make sure if we're going to reuse some of these materials, keep them in circulation, we need to make sure that they're safer and that they're not perpetuating hazard caused by various substances contained in that material. So of these areas, I just wanted to touch on a couple on a little bit more deeper level so you can understand our approach in a little bit more detail. If we look at supply chain responsibility and transparency first up. So when we think about supply chain responsibility, we're really talking about a code of conduct. And I know this is not a new concept to many of you. What we like to say is having a code of conduct is not particularly difficult. How you implement it is. And this is where we find TCO certified comes in and can play a fairly large part in ensuring that the code is actually implemented in the supply chain. So what's included in the code is the ILO and UN conventions that you may be familiar with, as well as criteria for maximum working hours. In our criteria, we make sure that the brand is responsible for implementing the code of conduct in the supply chain where certified products are made. And as an extension of that code, we work with what we call supply chain transparency, which means we have a system of risk-based factory monitoring, verifying social audits that are done by a third party, going back where we find non-conformities, making sure that those non-conformities are corrected, and finally closed so that that factory is definitely showing progress. Thirdly, we have new criteria around anti-corruption management. And while we can't eliminate corruption completely, we're very aware of that, we do consider it important enough to make a criterion to make sure that companies have management systems in place that can monitor and enforce the prevention of corruption happening in their business. Touching again on the responsible sourcing of minerals, there we've put in criteria and adding cobalt. We've had 3TG before, but cobalt. And what this means in reality is that we ask that all the brand owners with certified products have a strict supply chain policy for responsible mineral sourcing globally, and that it includes 3TG and cobalt. They must have a process to identify the smelters and refiners they use for those minerals, and also be part of established multi-stakeholder programs that work at supporting responsible sourcing for at least 3TG and cobalt. Finally, I want to touch on a new area that we're working in, and this is some initial criteria we have around something called process chemicals, which is the use of chemicals in the manufacturing site. So what we want to do with this initial criterion is get a better understanding for what chemicals are used in the manufacturing sites, and to make sure that if there are hazardous chemicals being used, that we're making sure that the workers are protected from exposure. This is a first step in process chemicals for us, and eventually we would like to move towards safer substitutions for any hazardous chemicals that may be used. Let's take a look at circularity. So this first picture, I'm fairly sure many of us have seen some variation of this various conferences or articles that we're reading about the circular economy. This is what we would call a typical linear process, moving from extracting raw materials through part supply, manufacturing and assembly, distribution, and then it comes to us as a user before we take that product today. And some of it ends up in landfill, incineration, or just kept in storage. This is what we want to move away from. We want to move to a more circular approach. And as we talked about before, it's really about keeping stuff out of landfill altogether, collecting what we have, recovering those materials, and keeping them in circulation. And what we want to do is keep them at their highest value, which really is with the user. That's where it's filling its intended function. It's doing what it's supposed to do. So our view on this is really keeping it in this green loop that we see here. Keep the IT products with the user. Extend the life as we know it. But also when we're done with it, have the opportunity to service it or maybe go out to the refurbished loop and prepare that product to be used by someone else, extending its life even beyond our use of the product. Further out, of course, we have the options of parts harvesting and recycling, which also definitely feed into this circular idea. But let's focus on this high value loop that doesn't encroach on our need for more natural resource use. And our approach to doing this is really looking at some new criteria for product lifetime extension. Very, very briefly, and you can get all these details on our website and in our criteria documents, so I won't bore you with all the details today. But basically, we're looking at the idea of having more options for replaceable critical components. These are product specific, so if you have any particular questions about a particular category, please email us or visit our homepage. We're also looking at standardized connectors. So having a requirement that the USB Type-C connector is in place for computers and phones. That makes the device much easier to share with someone else or to resell or prepare for reuse so that there's better chance of common connectors available. Product durability, incredibly important for life length. So we have criteria for durability testing, for drop and temperature. Battery longevity and replaceability. We want to make sure that all our certified products have a minimum number of charging cycles and instructions on how to replace the battery. And one that I know a lot of institutional purchasers, it keeps them awake at night, is secure data removal from products. How do we share or resell, reuse a product, give it to someone else when I'm concerned about my company's data, it's still being on that device? Great question. We want to be able to reassure purchasers that when they buy a certified product, they will have access from the brand to a link to free sanitization software. Safer chemicals, going back to that hazardous substance conversation we had earlier. In our previous generation that we launched 2015, we kind of changed the paradigm on hazardous substances. We realized that a lot of the most hazardous chemicals out there had been banned by regulations, legislation. Then we also know that those kinds of mechanisms run fairly slowly. Developing new laws around chemicals takes a long time. We also realized that if you're going to ban something, we need to replace it with something else. And what we thought was, we need to find out more about what is actually replacing those banned substances and is being used in products that are TCO certified. So what we did was we created a pathway for industry to make safer substitutions in all the products that we certify. We arrived at an accepted substance list, which we have for flame retardants, and in this generation, we're also using for plasticizers. And what this means is that the flame retardants and plasticizers in your certified products have been independently assessed for hazard in the Green Screen for Safer Chemicals hazard assessment tool. Once that assessment's been done, we publish a list of these safer alternatives or accepted substances. And the idea there is that industry as a whole should have access to information on what those safer substances are, so that the vision is we're driving the use of safer substitutions across all of industry, which when you think about it, allows us to more safely recapture and recycle those materials at the end of their life. And you can access that accepted substance list at our website as well. I mentioned key performance indicators before, or product sustainability information. Here we're specifying on every certificate connected to the product its specific product weight, the recycled percentage of recycled plastic content used, and the product's actual energy consumption. So we think this is really useful for purchasers to start being able to measure some key performance aspects of the certified products they buy. And finally, that big audacious SDG goal that we all have firmly in our sights these days. As I said, the totality of our criteria are really designed about making it easier for you to contribute to these goals. I do want to draw your attention, however, specifically to Goal 12, responsible consumption and production, which I think is very much tailored to using TCO certified connected to IT products. And if you choose to use TCO certified as part of your procurement strategy and your tenders, a few things to know. This is a leadership certification. This is not a certification for every IT product out there. It does go beyond compliance, but you can be assured that your compliance concerns are included in our criteria. This is a way to drive social and environmental responsibility connected to IT products. We know when purchasers use TCO certified, the industry sees that and they understand that these issues are important. It's a great way to reduce your risk, both on the environmental and social side. And also you get to save those valuable internal resources. We know purchasers and procurement people today are very stretched, have a very wide and deep mandate in category management. So by including both the criteria and verification of compliance with those criteria, we think we're able to save you some of your valuable resources so you don't have to do that work yourself. And speaking of resources, some things that we hope you'll find useful at tcocertified.com. You can go onto our product finder, and there you can search by product type, by brand. If you don't see your brand there, let them know, let us know, and we can start that conversation. We also have a purchaser guide on how to use TCO certified. We have our full criteria documents by product for those who are interested in doing some deep diving. And I also want to let you know about our exciting upcoming mini-series of webinars in March and April. We're going to be taking a look at circular IT in practice. So looking at some really concrete solutions that are out there that you can use once you have the products in place. You know, it's really our job as users to make them more circular. So hopefully we give you some good tips and advice and tools you can use. And you can also contact myself or my team. Our contact information and lovely portraits are right there, so feel free to contact us anytime with your questions and your comments. We'd love to hear about your experience of using TCO certified. We're here to help. Get in touch. And you can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. We have a fantastic new mini movie out, so please go find that and get inspired about getting active in sustainable IT. So with that, I'd love to thank you all for attending today. Please get in touch. We'd love to talk with you. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.